chop down the cherry tree. Our heart is like a song, no, it won't miss a beat. Driving through the country, going 105. Only time I ever really feel alive. Back to life. Bring me back to paradise. Bring me back. Back to life. Bring me back. Back, back, paradise. Oh, yeah. Ooh, the rising sun.
Hi and welcome to the Edinburgh TV Festival Post-MacTaggart Lecture interview. Gosh, that sounds like a tongue twister. I'm Kerry Burnell, author, actor and ambassador. I'm a white woman, I'm in my 40s, I have one hand, I have long blonde hair and very high shoes on today. I'm also wearing quite a jazzy velvet jumpsuit. The MacTaggart is the centrepiece of the Edinburgh TV Festival. It sets the tone, provokes thought and conversation, and shines a light on issues that should matter to all of us in this industry. Some incredible names have delivered the lecture, and last August, Jack Thorne, writer, playwright and campaigner, continued in the rich tradition of using MacTaggart to deliver an industry-changing lecture. He talked about how TV treats disabled people. TV has failed disabled people, utterly and totally, he said. He went on to give examples of disabled friends and colleagues who'd had awful experiences while working in this industry and offered thoughts on how we can and must change and do better. But Jack's MacTaggart was also underscored with hope. He believes in the power of TV and in the people in TV. It is an empathy box in the corner, he told us. It can entertain and delight us. It can teach us things. What we put on TV and how we make TV matters. It is my great pleasure to be able to welcome Jack to talk a little bit more about what he hoped to achieve with his lecture, what has happened since, and what might be possible next. Jack, hello and welcome.
Hello, so I should do the...
You should start with audio describing yourself. Yes.
I am tall, much less glamorously dressed than you, I'm bald.
White male?
White male, and I've got a scruffy beard and scruffy hair, and I'm generally a bit of a mess.
And you've got a ring on that's like a weird
Yes.
Fitbit.
Yes. I've got an aura ring on, which I'm obsessed by.
An aura ring? Is that going to like measure your aura? That would be amazing if it did.
Yeah, it would just see hate.
It would see hate. Oh gosh. Okay. I loved your lecture and it really resonated with me, and I'm sure many of my disabled friends and many of the creatives in the industry. It was harrowing in places and very, very relatable. So let's, before we sort of dive into the hardcore elements and the difficulty of some of those stories that you related, using your voice or your mic to, really amplify and elevate the disabled experience. Before we get into that, I think it would just be really lovely to hear about why you love TV and how you fell in love with it as a child, because I really enjoyed that part of the lecture and I could just imagine you. I think we're about the same age.
Yes.
So your TV experience would have been similar to mine,
yes.
Only controversially, we didn't have a telly because my mum thought it was, going to damage my imagination.
Oh my gosh.
I showed her.
So your whole career has been despite her.
Yes, despite my mother. But tell me about your experience growing up, being that little boy who, would pretend to love the news so that you could stay up later to watch telly.
Yeah, no, I thought it was delightful, and I still think it's delightful. My wife always says I basically have no critical faculty. If it's on TV, I'll enjoy it, and that's true. I'll just watch anything. And I still, I remember watching Lawn Bowls religiously when I was about 13, 14, 15, because it was on BBC Two at 4:30, and so I get in and I watch Lawn Bowls for an hour, and and watch them bowl.
And what kind of thing do you watch now? Are you quite sort of broad in the content that you enjoy?
I think so, and Rach is too. My wife is too. We always watch telly together. We watch it. We've got a projection unit, so we watch it. Yeah, I know. Yeah, well,
okay.
That's where I spend the money.
Job.
Yeah. So we watch everything on like a 6.5-foot screen, which is quite weird at times. I mean, it's great for sport, actually, better for sport than it is for drama. But
well, what about children's? Because you've got a little boy, haven't you?
He
likes the news, doesn't he?
And he tends to watch it. He tends to watch it upstairs in the kitchen. And
away from you.
Yeah, we've got a telly in the kitchen, so while we're doing other stuff, whereas telly in the evening, once he's gone to bed, we've got the monitor at the side, and then we're watching it on the big screen.
I see how it is in your house.
Yes.
So you've grown up loving television.
Yes.
You've had this, amazing career. We've obviously known each other a long time. I think we met 17 years ago.
Which makes you feel very old.
On a beloved scheme. I think it was called the Talent Fund.
Yeah.
And it was a fund for disabled on-screen talent run by the BBC, Channel 4 and the Actors Centre. And I think that's where we met.
Was it? Yeah, I went in for a day. That's all I remember, to talk about writing for telly.
Very happy, very smiley.
And you guys all did two-handers.
I can't remember, to be honest with you.
And we were talking about story and how story is put together. I was so terrible at those things. Well, I still am terrible at those things.
Well, you've got better. I think it's fair to say that you've got better, Jack.
I was so terrible then. Yeah.
I'm sure that's not true. So really, I just want to establish that you've sort of been working with the disabled community for a very long time. It's not something that's happened overnight. That's
I'm not just jumping on the thing.
On the diversity bandwagon. Yes, disability has been the most sort of systemically ignored group within diversity.
Yes,
so
but yes, the MacTaggart came about as a result of a frustration of sitting on a lot of groups for a very long time, and I'm sure you've sat on a lot of groups and being part of a lot of sessions where you'd see...
I've got a degree in schemes and initiatives. So.
Absolutely, and doing those, like going in for one day to talk to people, or sitting in a round table at different theatres and saying what disabled policy should be, and so a lot of being part of those management discussions, and then being part of trying to interact with disabled creatives and making shows and trying to make shows that and we didn't, without much money mainly, that featured disabled talent, because it's always been, I've always tried to make as much disabled TV as possible.
And is there a reason for that?
Well, I was a disabled person, and I was having a conversation about this today, actually, and the thing for me was I had this condition called allergic urticaria, and I was in pain.
It's easy to say, isn't
I know,
it?
it's
a familiar one that everyone recognises.
Absolutely, and there was there was an extreme moment where I was in bed for 6 months, and then there was a period where I was going to hospital twice a week. And then there was a long period after that where I was just in pain a lot of the time. And that thing and I think it's the thing that's not talked about the disabled experience much, which is that most disabled people have a relationship with pain. And most disabled people are dealing with pain on a daily basis. And I don't know whether it's fair to say most. A much more considerable group of people in the disabled world are dealing with pain, and it's a part of when you see disabled people on television. It's something that's not really discussed about the disabled experience, which is that it's something that happens regularly. And actually, I was part of the great Cheryl Lee Houston did an amazing documentary for Radio 4 about pain, and I was part of that. That was just really, really interesting. But so I was dealing with this, and I wasn't sure what I was, and I wasn't sure where I fitted. And then I went to a grey eye open day.
When you say I wasn't sure what I was, do you mean in terms of your identity or your career? Or...
Yeah, and I think it sounds weird to say, but and I think people with invisible disability, which is my group of people, struggle with this quite a lot. But that thing of when you have something that is such a huge element of your life, when it
it's hidden.
But it's hidden, and it's something that you're thinking about all the time. There wasn't a moment really when I wasn't thinking about pain. I wasn't in pain the entire time, but I was thinking about pain, and I was aware of my surroundings. I was, you know, I had that thing of just being hyper aware of the world I was in all the time. In terms of, for me, it was heat, right? So I was always monitoring my own heat and the heat of the world, and I went along to a grey eye open day, and I said, I don't know whether I belong here. And I got talking to a woman called Alex Bulmer, and she said, of course you belong here. You are a disabled person.
So for anyone who may not know what Grey Eye is, perhaps we should just explain that they are a wonderful inclusive theatre company.
Yes. I described them as the National Theatre of Disabled People, and I still think that that's...
Beautifully put, Mr. Thorne.
I think that is the best way of describing them.
Yes, no, it is. And I think they were established by Nabil Shaban and now wonderfully managed by Jenny Seeley.
Yes.
And actually, one of my first professional experiences working was also with Grey Eye.
Awesome.
So I know how warm and welcoming they are.
Yes.
So that's how it started for you, really. You became one of the family, as it were.
And from that, I just felt like I had a place that made sense to me. I felt like I belonged somewhere, and I really needed to belong somewhere. And that thing of just having somewhere where pain makes sense in a weird way, and where pain is just discussed very generally, felt really important to me.
Well, it's very freeing, isn't it, to suddenly be able to be yourself and not have to explain.
Exactly.
You know,
because it doesn't need explaining. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, if you're in that room, you're dealing with stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, and it felt very powerful to me, and that stuck with me. And I didn't work with Grey Eye straight away, but when I did some TV work, and it started with Skins, where I asked that we cast the part was about a young carer, and I asked that we cast a woman who had MS in the role, and the show brilliantly supported me. And from then on, and I did a show called The Spastic King for Channel 4's coming up, and then it all just sort of rolled from there, and then I did cast.
At that time, that was probably quite an unusual ask to say that you want to cast an actor that represents the character's lived experience really authentically. And
I think particularly with something like MS, where it can be replicated, it was unusual, but the production was amazing and supported it, and found an incredible actress called Maria Miles to do it, and she brought something to it which I think surprised everyone, and important lessons were learnt about authenticity, and so yes, and then.
But it's also about empowering the disabled person to be able to tell their story.
Yeah, it's authorship is two-handed. You know, it's about making authors, and it's about. I think there's a really good reason why authenticity and author are quite similar words.
I hadn't thought about it, but that's lovely. Yes.
Yeah, in that if you can feel it as a viewer when someone has got something that, when someone has got a truth that makes their story
resonate
and more watchable, and I think that something that has been lost historically in representations of the disabled experience is
excluded, not just lost, but excluded.
Yeah, but I don't just mean that disabled people have been excluded. I mean
but
that
the
TV,
storytelling.
Exactly. Yes, and TV has been damaged. The stories have been damaged because they have been inauthentic. And the point I was trying to make with the MacTaggart was the ripples from that are huge, because it's felt socially. If that is the representation of disability that people encounter, because they do not encounter disability in their daily lives, then
that's how you end up with really damaging stereotypes that do no one any favours. And then when you get someone with a disability appearing on your television, it's a shock.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And people don't know how to deal with it because we haven't been exposed to something that real before.
Exactly, exactly. Exactly.
So coming back to the MacTaggart Lecture, I feel like I want to say it in a Scottish accent. What was your initial feeling or reaction? Were you surprised? Were you like, yes, about time? Or were you sort of, I don't know, stunned? Because being a writer, especially a screenwriter, you're not necessarily called on to make big speeches unless you've won an award.
Yes, absolutely. And I won an award once when I went on stage.
I think you've won more than one award, Jack.
But Piers Morgan described it on Twitter as the worst speech in BAFTA history. So, you know, yes, that was another...
Well, do we need to listen to him, would be my first response to that. But also, I mean, I think that's a great... Is that on your CV? You know, that's a great title to have, I think.
But yes, I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. I didn't think I was in that bracket. And by in that bracket, I mean the sort of writer that would be asked to give such a speech, and I didn't think that I deserved it, and I
okay, so imposter syndrome was setting in.
Oh yeah, very much so. But and then it was like, I really want to do it. That was straight away. I really want to do it, and then I knew exactly what I wanted to talk about, and I knew that I had a lot to live up to from that moment, and and I got writing. I mean, I got writing straight away. It was like writing it, you know, when I asked Rachel to marry me, like the next day I started writing my speech for the wedding, because that thing...
Had you set a date by that time?
No, I don't think I had. But do you know what I mean?
Just the anxiety was driving you.
Exactly. That thing of just kind of like, these words will matter. And there's very few occasions where I've felt that these words will matter. And I feel that about my writing, but that's other people saying it.
Yeah.
The idea that the words that I say as myself will matter really weighed heavily, but also you know, I realised that it was a platform that I was being pushed up by, and that I should respond to that.
Yeah. So when you say you started writing, did you have to sort of research? Because, you know, you had so many stories of so many people's lives woven all the way through that lecture. And, you know, some of them quite harrowing to recount. Did you have all of that saved up in your heart already? Or did you kind of go and interview or speak to friends?
A lot. All of those things. Some parts of it I knew already, and some parts of it were surprises to me. And the thing I tried to do was I wrote it with enough notice that I could send it around. And so I had about 10 different...
When did you start it then?
Just almost straight away. And then I had about 10 editors that were just friends and people that I could trust to read and respond and input. And so what happened was...
Well, so that's quite courageous anyway, actually, because I think, I mean, you know, working with an editor anyway can be a delicate balance. And if you've got people, I guess people were trusting you with their lives though, weren't they? So they had to have autonomy over that.
Exactly. And that thing of, and I know, and this is something we were talking about before this started, but that thing of just kind of going, why's that guy got the microphone? And that thought hasn't left me.
So you felt that as someone who perhaps doesn't identify as having a disability anymore, was this the right topic?
Yeah, and am I? Well, I knew it was the right topic. I knew it was the right topic because I knew it had to be talked about. I knew that we were in crisis, and I knew that there was quite a serious thing that had been ignored.
I think a lot of disabled creatives and a lot of people in the disabled community would have a gratitude for you making that speech and raising those issues and using that power that you had in that moment to shine the spotlight upon us?
Well, I hope so. But in terms of showing it to as many people as possible, that was part of that process of going, I am trying to represent an experience. I am not saying this is definitive. I am trying to say that I recognise, because of COVID, because of actually the thing that really brought into my head was about 2 weeks after COVID really kicked in, so March, April time, I emailed 2 weeks after lockdown started, I emailed Jenny.
The first lockdown.
The first lockdown. I emailed Jenny Seeley and said, can we do something? Can we make something? And with Nikki Wildin, we came up with this idea of Crits Without Constraints that was disabled people.
I love Nikki.
She's amazing. Disabled people. Disabled people writing stories for disabled actors to perform, and we did it just a YouTube thing that was and it was a series of monologues. But as part of that, I spent time talking to the writers, and the stories that I wasn't hearing. That when you talk to friends, you don't really interview them. You don't really talk about their experience, and I wasn't aware how a number of my friends were being treated at the beginning of the crisis. And as that stuff came really clear, as that extreme prejudice that people were facing in terms of their healthcare, in terms of how they were being expected to behave as clinically extremely vulnerable.
Talk about that in a bit generally, but in a bit more detail. So, give me an example medically.
Well, I talked about Jamie in the speech, and Jamie was one of the writers on
the letter. Please let me live.
And Jamie was one of the writers on Crits Without Constraints, and they are profoundly brilliant writer. And when Jamie was telling me about their medical care, I was really scared.
For Jamie's well-being.
Jamie, and scared for our society that this was being allowed to happen. And then, that disease of a phrase, underlying health conditions, started being used by everyone. And that idea of going, there are two types of deaths, and just the general stigma that was being attached to disabled people, and you just realise this is where society had got to, and I think that.
You say got to, but I think it was probably always.
No, I think it was always there. But I think that COVID was. I think COVID was the most extreme example of that behaviour. Yes. Manifesting itself, and it felt like there needed to be a response to that, and Telly hasn't responded. Telly isn't responsive to disabled stories, and you sort of go, how the hell does this get changed? And I do think Telly is a revolutionary device. I do think Telly can do revolutionary things.
You haven't met my mum, but okay. But, I agree. I completely agree.
And so I think what happened with you on CBeebies was a revolution.
Unexpectedly, but actually, if you and really that was nothing to do with me. I was just the first person through the door with an upper limb difference without a prosthetic on a mainstream channel. But if you look at the amount of contributors or celebrities, performers right across all of our channels, all of our content now, who have the same disability or a similar disability as me, and no one blinks, and that
No,
we're everywhere.
I think you can mark a trajectory from that to Rose and the 2 minutes of silence on. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, on 20 seconds of silence.
Well, I think Rose just shone her own light, really.
No,
You can't take away from that.
No, but that's my point. It's a light. It's a light that travels. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, and that as that light travels, different people appear in that light and they shine in it. And Rose shone incredibly bright. But it is.
She did, but that, I think, strictly is a show that has done diversity really well for a long time. Disability has come to it later, because it always does.
Yeah.
But if you look at their age representation,
Martin was on Dancing with the Stars way before the BBC managed it in the UK. So, you know, that there is a sort of, like, you know, we could have got there sooner.
We always could have got there sooner, but you know, just their general representation of diversity is really, I think inclusion is at the heart of their show.
Yes.
And so then when disability came to it, they were already set up so beautifully to make that feel very organic, and they clearly listened to her and worked with her in a really nuanced way.
Absolutely.
So that she felt empowered to tell her story in the way that was completely true to her. And she also did a brilliant thing by making herself an ambassador for deaf joy, really. And it radiated from her. And you know, in some ways, that was a really courageous thing to do and a very generous thing for her to do, because she sort of put herself in the firing line. The next beautiful deaf dancer may not want to share that much information, may not have to, because they will just be able to dance.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
I mean, I just love Rose. I just love her so much, and I was so happy that she won. But you know, because she's an incredible dancer at the end of the day, and
Absolutely.
I don't think there is anyone who wasn't in love with her by the end of the show. You know. So, God, we've gone completely off topic.
No, sorry,
but
no.
But it's, you know, it's all part of the same conversation, really, that a change is needed, and someone has to be the first person through the door.
Yes.
And I guess in that moment, when you were giving that speech, that was your moment in the spotlight, and you extended it to us. What sort of a reaction did you expect, and what do you think the immediate reaction from the industry was? The media, the public, something that I've heard that you're probably aware of, you know, is a lot of, let's call them industry folk, shall we? Kind of saying like, oh, wasn't Jack so generous? Wasn't he so kind? What a lovely man Jack is. And yes, all of those things are true, but they're slightly missing the point, which is that actually they are the ones that need to do the work, and they are the ones that need to instigate the change. But I don't want to answer the question for you. So what was the reaction?
The reaction was incredibly generous and remains generous. I was very, very heartened by the response of industry bosses to it all, and I think there is change happening. I know we're going to talk about underlying health condition and the report that we made. The thing that's difficult going forward is that the change that's required is huge, and so while there is an appetite for representative change.
So do you mean on-screen representation?
Exactly, and behind. You know, that there is an appetite for it, but there isn't. I hope. No, I think it's wrong to say there isn't. I hope that there is an appetite for the sort of transformation that British TV could perform that would allow us to be genuine world leaders when it comes to disabled representation, because what we see on screen, what we have behind screen, will be.
Well, one mirrors the other, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and what needs to happen is that the geography of our TV landscape needs to be altered, and the social model of disability, which I think is one of the most beautiful ideas that's ever existed, can be enacted in our landscape, but it requires
Do you
a
want
real...
to try and clarify what that is?
What the social model of
yes, just for
disabilities.
anyone who may think, oh God, I don't know what that means.
I love talking about the social model of disability. So
Well,
the
I
idea...
do, but I can never get it down to one sentence. But you're the writer, so...
I'll have a go. So the social model of disability says that disabled people are not made disabled by their impairments. They are made disabled by the society around them, which isn't built for them to use. So society, if you are using a restaurant and the restaurant isn't accessible, if there's steps going up to the restaurant, then that restaurant is no longer available to you. So you are disabled by the restaurant steps, not by the fact that you're in a wheelchair. And if we are to really challenge what TV can be, if we are to really challenge notions of authorship, and authorship is not about writing, it's about directing, it's about editing, it's about acting, it's about costume, it's about makeup. All these things are acts of authorship. If we are to challenge authorship truly, then we need to alter the way that TV operates, and that requires a real change of heart where accessibility is concerned, and that does require a revolution. And so yes, I'm hearing all the right things from the industry, and our launch, when we launched Underlying Health Condition, was really, really well supported. But what happens next in the next year is going to be huge in terms of whether there is a genuine appetite for change.
So there's a hunger, as we've already established, for on-screen representation, for telling those stories, and there is, a willingness and there is work available for disabled crew, camera people, off-screen talent, but there isn't a willingness to make reasonable adjustments. Is that what we're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that the industry is built wrong. So the industry has not been built, it has not been regulated with disabled people in mind. So, for instance, and this is our report. Everyone forgot about the toilets, right? And we spent a long time surveying facilities companies, and we've...
Well, hang on. Let's just explain what the report is. So it's underlying health condition, your favourite phrase,
yes,
or UHC, if
yes,
you're really no, which I now am. Do you want to just talk about the people involved in this,
yes,
and
absolutely,
how it came about?
Absolutely. And by the way, when you say, you know what I mean? Like, the thing that the only thing that I have gripes with about the whole experience of the last 6 months is that my partners have sometimes been denied the space that they need because it's like my name has been way too prominent. And so, yes, my partners are...
Not your wives, but...
No. Are the magnificent Katie Player, the tremendous Genevieve Barr, and the wonderful Holly Lubrin. And we worked for a long time. We've been going about 14 months now, I think. And so we were going before the MacTaggart. When the MacTaggart came along, I was already part of this group.
So these are all disabled women who have worked in this industry...
Yes.
For time.
Yes.
And worked with you in various different guises. Yes,
all had the tremendous disadvantage of working with me, and
lived to tell the tale.
Exactly. So Katie's production manager, Holly works behind the scenes on lots and lots of different shows. Genevieve was primarily an actor. Now she's a writer. She's also co-writing with me quite a lot, and we're a writing partnership. So. We live in each other's pockets a bit, and I just adore her. But yeah, and that we set out. It started with just Genevieve and me, and then it sort of grew. We set out to just try and look at how we look at the industry and how we look at how to cause a little revolution in the industry. And actually, when Katie got involved, she said that your targets are wrong. If you are just looking at representation, you've got it wrong. Accessibility is the most important thing. So we said, okay, how do we set about trying to make the industry more accessible? And then we built this campaign, and the campaign involved us surveying facilities companies and studios and trying to get a sense of what the current TV landscape is. And the findings were
bleak,
very bleak. Our report is called "Everyone Forgot About the Toilets" because we found there's only one facilities company that has a disabled toilet, and that is only one disabled toilet.
In the UK?
In the UK. And that is the experience that I've had on set a few times, and that is when I've sat in those groups, you know, those endless panels, that's the first thing that I've heard at every one of those, which is, I have to travel to use the toilet.
Being able to go to the toilet is a human right.
It's a human right. It is a human right.
You shouldn't be having to, you know, drive on an A road in a 10-minute break to then queue up at a supermarket, to go to the toilet, to jump back in the car, to get back to set, to make an apology.
Absolutely.
To then feel shit all day because you've held filming up.
And I talked about it in the lecture, but, you know, it's not just one disabled person that I've spoken to that deny themselves food and water because they do not have access to a toilet. And the idea that in order to work in this industry, you have to eat less and drink less is really, really troubling. Really, really troubling. And that is just the tip of the iceberg where all this stuff is concerned, you know, where someone is going, well, we've got an office on the 6th floor. Unfortunately, it's inaccessible for you to use. We're really happy to have you part of this production, but do you mind working in the canteen? You know, and you hear these stories all the time. You hear the stories all the time. And that exclusion means that when you get to the question of authorship, if you are an excluded author, you are no longer an author. And so if TV is to change, it needs to embrace the need to change its geography. And if it changes its geography, then wow, what a difference.
Yeah, wow, what a difference. I mean, I think everyone would massively agree with you, and I think between us we've probably got so many stories of people
absolutely
just having a horrific time with access.
And it is possible to change, and it's not so hard. It just requires an investment.
Do you want to talk about your sort of 3 or 4 driving requests for underlying health condition, which is a pressure group?
Yes, we are a pressure group.
The pressure is being applied. Do you want to talk about particularly the line in the budget to try and realise access?
So we've got 4 key points. And by the way, we're underlying health condition. We're also working with DGP TV. We're working with DANC. We're working with One in 4 Coalition.
Amazing organisations.
Like we're not just. It's not just kind of like it's not just the 4 of us. There's a huge wealth of disabled organisations who have supported and been part of this report, which is incredible. The CDN, the incredible Deborah Williams. You know that, and yes, and we came up with 4 key recommendations.
Just before you get into that, can we just break down what those groups are? Just because you know, anyone who's watching who hasn't heard of them, where have you been? Just may want to know more, and you know, people are willing to try and grow their knowledge at the moment. So DANC, I love them. I think they are absolutely fabulous, and they are doing something that even I didn't really think was possible. You know, they are absolutely smashing through that glass ceiling. Absolutely. They are so solution focused. There is never any moaning. You know, and
they've built a huge, beautiful community of people.
And they're very forensic, so they understand. You know, they've got 7 steering groups. They understand all the different nuances of all the different, you know, sort of the multiple diversities and experience that come with disability.
Yes, we love
them. My God, we love them.
Yes.
I can't even say it. DDP TV.
I had to practice it quite a lot before the MacTaggart. I really did. I would stand in my room and go DDP TV, DDP TV, and so they are again a community. Well. They're a community of people. They are set upon supporting people getting into TV and then supporting them through their careers in TV. And they're very focused on how you support the people through those careers.
And they're behind the scenes.
They're behind the scenes. They're run by people behind the scenes. They're also interested in front of the camera, but I think their focus is mainly behiend the camera, and they're amazing.
They're fierce as well.
They're fierce. Yes. They're fierce. They're fierce. Caroline is amazing.
Yes. She certainly is.
And then there's One in 4, the One in 4 Coalition, who are an American group who have pushed a whole number of different things, particularly accessibility coordinators, and they are supporting a whole heap of stuff, and they're brilliant. And then there's CDN, run by the magnificent Deborah, who have been monitoring TV and trying to push for targets in TV for a very long time. And Doubling Disability, which was one of their key initiatives, I think the most powerful thing I heard at our launch was Deborah saying how angry she felt that those numbers hadn't been reached, that the failure to achieve the increasing representation that everyone had set out to agree to, which is, we need to double disability representation behind the camera. And when you look at and in front of the camera and everywhere. But when you look at the behind the camera numbers, that instead of getting a serious amount of growth, there was only a 0.9% growth in the Doubling Disability period. That failure is astonishing and is on all our heads who work in TV, that wasn't achieved and there wasn't focus upon that. So yes, everyone spoke at our launch, everyone is part of our report, everyone wrote in our report, which was incredible, and we tried to make it a whole, a cross-community event and a cross-community report. And it felt, the day felt really, really empowering because so many different people spoke, and it felt like there was a diversity of experience there rather than just kind of like, oh, this is what we're doing, And
there was an audience of the people who needed to be there, commissioning editors.
Absolutely. It was really beautiful. But our 4 key points are aligning the budget for needed adjustments. So if and that can be anything, and it's not a huge amount of money. We're asking for £5,000 on a scale going down from that. But it's money that is controlled by the production and is in every budget, so that it is considered, that access is considered as a key component of how the production works.
So that when you cast a disabled actor, or you decide that you're going to have a disabled runner, and they need a needed adjustment, is that what they're now called?
Yes. Yeah.
There isn't this panic of, well, shit, where do we get the money from?
Absolutely. And also, it can be, and this is related to the next point, which is accessibility coordinators, it can be that someone that doesn't identify as disabled works on the camera team, needs a stool. Right, and that there is money in the budget for someone to have a stool so that they can sit down between shots. And that sort of thing, which isn't huge, can make a huge difference to someone's experience of working in television. That if you're working a 14-hour day and your legs cause you pain and you don't want to say so because you don't want to lose your job, and disabled people are very good at fitting in with other people's narratives. Yeah, that not having someone in production that's there going, do you need anything? That will just make a huge difference. Which brings me on to the second point. Our second point is an accessibility coordinator, and an accessibility coordinator on every shoot, from the beginning of a production.
Can we just unpick what that is and what that means? Because different people have different understandings of what it is. And a lot of people think it's just around access. So it's just someone to come in, say, oh, that step's too high, or, well, this table needs to be lower. When actually, so often it can be about, a camera angle, or storytelling, or, if you've got a love scene happening and you've got, I don't know, an actor with my disability, for instance, well, let's see how that person gets changed. Let's just have that built into the mechanics of the scene.
And it's taking it from the very beginning of a production. So you're not coming in and going, oh, you've got a disabled actor, how are you going to manage this bit? It's about going, okay, let's talk about locations. Let's talk about how different things will work. And we
early intervention is crucial.
Exactly. And we see it as an equivalent of an intimacy coordinator. So intimacy coordinators have changed the industry, and they've done it remarkably easily. It feels like it's just come in and produced this wave that's made everyone feel a lot safer in dealing with anything that involves intimacy. Accessibility needs exactly the same focus. So having someone that's there that can deal with the reasonable adjustments budget, that's there as an ear for people. If they've got any needs at all, there's someone there that's an ear for people. And access is a big word. It doesn't just mean steps, it means attitude, it means everything. And having someone there that's responsible for making sure that the set is fully accessible. And they're not going to be full-time. You know, there's no way
Well,
of
they don't
making
need
them
to be
full-time.
on set every day,
Exactly.
do they?
It's just someone that is part of the production that is there for that specific reason. And hopefully that is a change that can happen quite quickly, and we're having really positive discussions about that feel like they're getting to a quite fruitful place quite quickly. So let's fingers crossed about that.
Mm-hmm.
The third thing is facilities. A freelancers fund,
Yes,
and the facilities should be last. The third thing is the freelancers fund, which is a fund that's there for disabled professionals to access to help with the needs that they've got.
And where does the fund come from?
It is hopefully what we'd like beyond anything else, but who knows whether this will happen and can happen, and
Well,
this is a bigger
this is
discussion.
your pitch. Sell your story.
So there's a thing called the High-End TV Fund, which is if you are a high-end TV show, which means your budget is more than £750,000 an hour.
Well, that's what we're both being paid, so technically this is.
Absolutely. You put in 0.5% of your budget to a fund, the High-End TV Fund, which is used for all sorts of different things, but mainly for training purposes and to make sure that people are being given access within the industry and everything else. And it's a remarkable and wonderful thing that the television industry does, and that the British television industry does. There isn't an equivalent anywhere else. It's wonderful. We think if we could have on top of that 0.1%, which is just specified for disabled people, to allow for access requirements, then that money, which could be accessed by disabled people as a sort of supplement to access to work, or as a alternative to access to work if you cannot access to work very quickly, which is very difficult to do. You know that.
So access to work, I think, wasn't really set up for freelancers, was it? So that's where the difficulty comes in.
If you get a job, you know, in telly, you can get a job on Thursday that starts on Monday, and applying for access to work requires a degree level of work. You know, that you have to fill in an awful lot of forms and become part of something that's very complicated. TV needs a fluidity, and so the Freelancers Fund would allow for that fluidity, and would support disabled professionals in every way. For instance, if you have needs that require you to have a certain level of support before you're ready for the day, you know, if your call is at 6 a.m. And then you need a support worker with you at
4 a.m.
4 a.m. in order to facilitate that. That's what the fund would allow for. Equally, a ramp. You know, Katie Player, one of my partners. Is it weird saying partners? It's just so weird. You know, like, you know.
It's fine. It's fine.
Like a coven. We're a coven. Katie got a ramp as part of a show that I work with her on, and she takes that ramp with her everywhere, you know, and it gets stored when she's not on set, but that ramp allows her to move around, and it's a key part of her needs. And while facilities companies do not have access as should be, having that ramp is essential for her.
And I think that's possibly one of the issues with access to work, is that then the ramp, for instance, doesn't belong to the person.
No, and it has to go back.
I mean, what's
and then it has to be applied for every time, and it's just a very, very complicated.
Exhausting.
Yes, and there could be a world where access to work is. We try and reform access to work, and I think that is a longer-term goal.
It's a government ask, isn't it?
But the appetite for disabled people that this government has displayed is not a Frances Ryan, in her beautiful book, Crippled, just talks about how austerity worked and how austerity just undermined disabled benefits at every possible opportunity. And so and access to work has been cut as a result of austerity, you know, and so there isn't an appetite for changing access to work. TV is rich compared to most industries. TV can provide for a shortfall and can provide for a temporary need. And why shouldn't TV do that? And if we had this freelancers fund, it could be.
When we have the freelancers fund.
When we have this freelancers fund, as we should have this freelancers fund, it could be, again, a small revolution for disabled people. And then the final point, and this is the most difficult point, and this is the one that requires the most attention and the most talking about, is a studios and facilities fund, because we believe that because we haven't regulated studios and facilities, it is quite harsh to turn around and go, and now you need to change. That we should all take responsibility for the fact that the studios were built wrong. We should all take responsibility for the fact that facilities companies haven't got the gear to supply 20% of the population. And we should be in a situation where 20% of facilities are accessible. You know, but that...
Or more.
But we should certainly be in a situation where there is a disabled fleet that is available for people, if they are disabled, to use on a set.
Love the word fleet, yes.
And we do not have that right now, and making that change is expensive, and we think we will need a partnership with the studios and facilities companies to make that change happen. And that is a much more difficult thing, and it requires deciding what a studio should look like, what a facilities company should look like, what accessible really means, what an accessible toilet is. It's a complicated thing, and it's going to require a lot of discussion.
But it's achievable.
But
it's not
achievable.
Like it's not.
It's not Mars. No, it's not Mars.
There are conversations about privatising Channel 4, and the government wants to look at how the BBC is funded. Of course they do. What impact do you think those kind of fundamental changes to two huge public service broadcasters would have in terms of improving the industry?
Well, I think that there is a reason for. Well, public service broadcasting is under threat, right? If you take away those two, there is no such thing as public service broadcasting. And one thing that it's been very interesting talking about this internationally, the whole idea of what the British industry is, the whole idea of the MacTaggart, actually, the whole idea of discussing what TV should be is quite a British phenomenon. And if you look internationally, those things aren't discussed because there is no sense of an obligation on TV. There is a sense of this is how TV is, and these are all private companies, and they run in their certain ways, and everything else. And actually, when we're looking,
so that's unique to us, then.
I think it is unique to us, and I'm sure there are other countries that have it. By the way, that I don't know about, but certainly from my experience of TV.
So that's encouraging.
The UK is in a unique position in terms of that, and we should protect that. And that means that if you want to get change happening, those people have got an obligation to be leaders, and they take that obligation very seriously. And you know, and the discussions I've been having with Channel 4 and the BBC have been really fruitful because of that, because they have disabled ambassadors, because they believe that it is their responsibility,
because they have to reflect, or they want to reflect, all UK communities.
Exactly.
And the disabled community is part of that.
Yes, and the Retian ideal does still exist, and the Retian ideal says that TV has an importance, and the BBC and Channel 4 reflect that importance. And I'm not saying that other companies don't take it seriously, and actually we've had incredible responses from streamers and everyone else. But it's not their obligation to do it. They have an obligation to their stakeholders. with the BBC and Channel 4, we are the stakeholders. We are the stakeholders, and that makes them responsible for the whole of society, and that's beautiful. That's beautiful because TV is society, and society is TV. That there's an interaction there. So if we can protect that, then we can do incredibly important things.
Okay, but so when we're going to have to end really, really shortly.
I'm sorry.
No. But I just quickly want to touch upon, you say that, streamers and, other providers don't have a responsibility, but I think they are perhaps missing out on the really specific, nuanced beauty of disabled storytelling by perhaps not having that.
I just want to clarify. They feel a responsibility, and that there are people in those organisations who absolutely do care and do feel a responsibility for it. The difference between that and public service broadcasting is that when it comes to BBC and Channel 4, it's written into who they are.
Yes,
Their responsibility is written into who they are. And that's my worry. If you lose that, then and like I say. Amazon and Netflix have been incredibly responsive to things we've been saying and have really, really been incredibly supportive of what we've been talking about, and Disney actually too. I just think that in this world that we're in, where that you don't want to lose the public service broadcaster for whom the charter exists, that this should be who they are, So I'm in no way denigrating them, and actually have had a really powerful and positive relationship with them,
Well, it's the centenary, so it's 100 years of the BBC, so that should be celebrated. It's been so lovely talking to you. We've covered such a lot of ground, and as always, you were typically honest and open and just a joy to talk to. Don't look so nervous. Your MacTaggart was really vital, and it's just been really lovely to hear, I guess, the effects of that speech and how it's resonated and everything that is going to be realised as a result of that. So on behalf of the Edinburgh TV Festival and all of those tuning in, thanks so much. It's been a real privilege and pleasure to talk to you, Jack Thorne.
It's been really nice talking to you too. Thank you very much.
That's okay.
Are we out?